So I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, as the luminous torch of Imamah passes from one bearer to the next, so too does our understanding build session upon session into a single interconnected tapestry of divine guidance. Over the last two gatherings, we journeyed with the ninth Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad. We witnessed his God-given wisdom that defied age, his courage that unmasked a pious tyrant, and his spiritual protection that sheltered a besieged community. We saw him transform a gilded cage into a pulpit of truth, bequeathing to us not just intellectual treasures, but a fortress of faith in the sacred hiss. That legacy of youthful authority and profound generosity is the essential preface to our session today. For the torch of divine guidance, though extinguished in one bearer by the cowardice of poison, is never truly put out. It ignites immediately and with renewed intensity in the next. Today, we turn our hearts to the 10th Imam, the son of the generous one, Imam Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hadi, peace and blessings be upon him and his family. His story is not separate from his father's. It is the intensification of the same divine resistance. Where his father was summoned to Baghdad, he would be dragged to Samarra. Where his father faced a gilded cage, he would face an actual garrison. Where his father planted seeds of guidance, he would nurture them into a vast underground network that would sustain and nurture the faithful through the coming occultation. This is the story of a light that refused to be imprisoned. It is the story of Wilayah transcending physical walls and a divine charter that no earthly power could revoke. This is the chronicle of the Imam who perfected the art of leading a global movement from within the heart of a military fortress. With the epic of Imam al-Jawad fresh in our minds, we now turn to his son, Imam Ali al-Hadi, the light in the garrison. Now, while we recommend that everyone review the previous parts in order so as to gain the most from this cumulative study, we have included, as we do every week, a brief recap so as to set our context. Let us now proceed imploring God to help us in our endeavor, to open our hearts to true learning, to bring us ever closer to him and his beloved Ahl Bayt, and to make us from amongst those who tirelessly, sincerely, and actively yearn for the return of Imam al-Hujjah, that the earth be filled with justice and equality as it is filled with injustice and tyranny. If I can get a loud salawat, we can move on to the recap.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج.
So in our last two sessions, we explored the monumental life of the ninth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad. His story, as we said, was a masterclass in divine leadership, teaching us two core lessons: that true authority flows from God, not age, and that true protection comes from Tawhid, or monotheism, not worldly means. So let's now recap part one of Imam al-Jawad, the Imam of youthful authority. First, we confronted the crisis of his succession at just 8 years old, following the martyrdom of his father, Imam al-Rida, peace and blessings be upon him and them both. This was a profound test of faith for the community. We found the theological foundation in the Quran in the person of the prophet Yahya, John the Baptist, to whom God said, and this is from Quran, Surah Maryam, the chapter of Saint Mary, 19th chapter of the Quran, verse 12, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O Yahya, O John, hold the book with power, with strength, and we gave him wisdom or hukm, while he was still a child. This was the ilm al-ladunni, this direct God-given wisdom that is independent of age. We saw that the Caliph Ma'mun's gilded cage strategy, attempting to co-opt the Imam through marriage and court life, but the Imam turned this prison into a pulpit. In the legendary debate that we discussed with the empire's chief judge, Yahya ibn Aktham, an account detailed by Sheikh al-Mufid, the young Imam's deconstruction of a simple fiqh or jurisprudential question was a dazzling display of this divine knowledge, establishing his authority beyond any doubt. Second, we explored his role as the generous protector. In an era of fear, he gifted his community the famous hirs, or spiritual fortress, a profound tool of Tawhid, or monotheism. This supplication is a portable school of tawakkul, or reliance on God, reminding the bearer that all protection comes from God alone. And a part of the hirs reads, O light, O proof, O manifest, O illuminating, O Lord, suffice me against the evils and the calamities of time. And of course, the references, like always, are in the write-up, which I encourage everyone to review. We saw this divine providence in his own household. God provided him a sanctuary, not in the political barren marriage to al-Fadl, but in the pure vessel of Sayyidah Sumana al-Maghribiyya. She was the woman of immense piety chosen by God to bear the line of Imamah, as narrated in the traditions. It was she whom her son, our 10th Imam, would later praise, saying, my mother is the one who has profound insight into my right, and she is from the people of paradise. And of course, the reference is in the write-up. Finally, we faced his tragic martyrdom at just 25. As widely reported, he was poisoned at the behest of the Caliph. The Abbasid plot to control the lineage had failed utterly. Their political marriage remained childless, while the light of Imamah continued, protected through Sayyidah Samara. When Imam Jawad was martyred, his son, Imam Ali al-Hadi, was also just 8 years old, and the Ummah faced the exact same test again, and there is a wisdom in this. Imam al-Jawad's life had prepared them and us with 3 essential truths. Number 1, authority is divine, not worldly. God's proof transcends age and worldly criteria. Number 2, clarity exposes hypocrisy. A life of pure taqwa or God awareness is the ultimate weapon against sophisticated falsehood. And number 3, spiritual fortresses endure. True protection is found in tawakkul, reliance on God, not in worldly security. These lessons are the foundation for today, because while Imam al-Jawad faced the gilded cage of Baghdad, his son would confront the actual garrison of Samarra. The struggle was about to intensify. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the main piece, which is Imam Ali al-Hadi, the Charter of Wilayah, and the light in the garrison.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأنت.
So let's start with a very brief introduction into this, the indomitable light. As we said, our last reflection concluded with the tragic state-sanctioned martyrdom of Imam Muhammad al-Jawad in Baghdad in the year 220 after Hijrah. At just 25 years old, his light was extinguished by poison, a victim of the Abbasid regime's deep-seated fear of divine truth. Now, as we approach the history of his passing, we must tread with care, with the care of a historian. Many popular and historical accounts, including those cited by al-Mas'udi, indicate that his own wife, al-Fadl, the daughter of the Caliph Ma'mun, was the instrument of this treachery, carrying out the orders of the new Caliph al-Mu'tasim. This narrative serves as a powerful testament to the failure of Ma'mun's plan to co-opt the Imamah. However, in our methodology of seeking truth, we must also embrace scholarly precision. This is where we value the careful method of a scholar like the great Sheikh al-Mufid. In his foundational work, Kitab al-Irshad, he confirms the summons by the Caliph and the death by poison, but he remains reserved on explicitly naming the perpetrator, demonstrating a historian's caution when absolute irrefutable proof is absent. Sheikh al-Mufid says in Kitab al-Irshad, and of course the references in the write-up, and al-Mu'tasim summoned him to Baghdad. He continued to stay in Baghdad until he, peace and blessings be upon him, passed away in Baghdad, poisoned. But the central, undeniable truth is this. The Abbasid scheme, whichever Caliph ordered it, was an abject failure. Their plot to infiltrate and control the Imamah through a political marriage was rendered utterly barren. The light of Imamah, the sacred trust of Wilayah, did not pass through the line of the Caliph. It passed by God's decree to his son, the inheritor of his knowledge and station. That is Imam Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hadi. And just as his father had done, he assumed the awesome responsibility of Imamah as a child, at the tender age of 8, having been born in Medina in 212 years after Hijrah. The vessel for this divine light was not a political princess, but a woman chosen by God for her purity, said the Sumana al-Maghrabiyya. She was a Jariyah, a handmaiden, whose nobility came not from worldly lineage, but from her profound taqwa, God awareness or piety. Many biographical notes state she was the mother of all of Imam al-Jawad's children, and today she is buried in the holy al-Askariyin shrine in Samarra, a testament to her elevated station. The most powerful testament to her grace comes from her own son, Imam Ali al-Hadi, who is reported to have said of her, and we've quoted partially this before, this is a slightly lengthier quote, and of course the reference is in the write-up. My mother is one who has profound insight into my right, and she is from the people of paradise. A rebellious Satan does not come near her, nor does the scheming of a stubborn tyrant reach her, and she is protected by the eye of God that never sleeps. This transition from father to son, from one generation of resistance to the next, exemplifies the core thesis of the Imam's struggle. The enemy believes they can extinguish the light by assassinating one person, but they fail to understand that the Imamah is one continuous divine institution. As the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Imam Khamenei, may God protect him, explains in his macro analysis of the lives of the Imam, their struggle was a single unified movement adapted for different times. Imam Khamenei says, the life of these great ones, that is the Imams, despite apparent differences, is as a whole a continuous and long movement which starts from the 10th or 11th year of Hijrah and continues for 250 years. These great ones are one unit, one personality. And this is, of course, from the book that is the main inspiration for our sessions on Imamah, which is the 250-year-old person. So the Abbasid regime, now under the notoriously anti-Shia Caliph al-Mutawakkil, recognized this threat. They realized their gilded cage strategy had failed. Their new strategy was not co-option, but containment. Fearing the young Imam's growing influence in Medina, they would shift their tactics from political marriage to forced exile. This session will cover this brutal shift. We will see how the regime forcibly dragged the Imam from the city of his grandfather to a military garrison. We will witness how the Caliph tried to humiliate the Imam, only to be morally and intellectually defeated in his own court. And we will study the timeless theological charter the Imam delivered, not in a time of peace, but from within the heart of that very military prison. This is the story of the light in the garrison. Please give me a salawat and we proceed.
اللهم صل على محمد.
على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه.
So, first of all, we look at a light in Medina, a tyrant's fear. For 13 years after his father's martyrdom, Imam Ali al-Hadi lived in his ancestral home, the city of God's messenger, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, Medina. He was a man of peace, dedicated to scholarship, worship, and the quiet guidance of a community that sought him out for his unmatched knowledge and piety. But the light of truth, by its very nature, exposes the darkness around it. And the darkness of that era was personified by the Abbasid Caliph, al-Mutawakkil. Al-Mutawakkil was not like his predecessors. He was a tyrant defined by his vicious and public hatred for the Ahl al-Bayt. He is the Caliph who, in his paranoia, infamously ordered the destruction and ploughing of the holy shrine of Imam Hussein in Karbala, banning all pilgrimage to it. The existence of a beloved, respected, and morally superior Alid, which is a descendant of Imam Ali, in Medina was an intolerable threat to his fragile authority. So now we look at the deceptive summons. The Caliph's fear was actually led by his own agents. The governor of Medina, appointed by the Caliph, someone called Abdullah ibn Muhammad, began a campaign of slander, sending a stream of letters to the capital, warning that Imam al-Hadi was amassing funds, weapons, and followers, and that he was a danger to the state. Sheikh al-Mufid details this manufactured crisis in Kitab al-Irshad. The Imam, fully aware of this slander, wrote his own letter to the Caliph, refuting the accusations and exposing the governor's lies. Al-Mutawakkil, trapped, responded with the classic tactic of a despot, a respectful invitation that was, in reality, an ironclad summons. He dismissed the lying governor to create a facade of goodwill, but immediately dispatched a military escort under someone named Yahya ibn Harathama. Now, if you want to know more about him, go to the article in the footnote. I've explained who he is. And his job was to ensure the Imam was brought to the capital. Sheikh al-Mufid writes, he, al-Mutawakkil, wrote a letter to him, Imam al-Hadi, mentioning that he had learnt of the lies of Abdullah ibn Muhammad, saying, and I have ordered him to be removed, and I am yearning to meet you. Therefore come with whoever you wish from your family and servants. This yearning was a lie. When the Imam arrived in Baghdad, he was not met with honor, but with humiliation. At first, he was ignored, and then, as al-Mas'udi notes in his history, he was initially forced to lodge in what is called a Khan al-Sa'alik, a rundown inn for the poor, a deliberate and petty insult. Let's now look at the geopolitical prison. This was the prelude to the final move. In approximately May, or Jamad al-Thani, Jamadi 2 of the year 233 after Hijrah, the Imam was forcibly relocated to the Caliph's new capital in Samarra. Now, Samarra was not a civilian city. It was a purpose-built, fortified military headquarters, a geopolitical prison. The Caliph had built it to house his loyal Turkic slave soldiers. Isolating himself from the general populace he no longer trusted. And into this camp, he brought the Imam. He was not housed in a palace. He was settled in the al-Askar, military garrison quarter, on a street named Abi Ahmed Street. This is the origin of the epithet that both he and his son would carry, al-Askari, the one of the camp. It was a title of imprisonment. He would spend the next 20 years of his life here, under constant surveillance, a prisoner in all but name, until his martyrdom in 254 years after Hijrah. But let's now look at God's perfect scheme. Now, the Caliph's strategy was simple: to sever the head from the body, to cage the Imam's authority by cutting him off from the vast network of his followers. But here we witness the profound wisdom of the Quran. The tyrant schemes, but God is the better schemer. In Quran, in Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, third chapter of the Quran, verse 54, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they schemed, and God schemed, and God is the best of schemers. But what does it mean that God schemes? Allama Tabatabai, in his masterpiece, Tafsir al-Mizan, explains the concept. The makr, or scheme of the enemy, is to achieve an evil goal through hidden, treacherous means. The makr or scheme of God is not deceit. It is the perfect and unexpected nullification of their plot, using their own actions against them to bring about the triumph of truth. Allama says, the divine makr or the divine scheme is to make the servant reach their consequence of his makr or scheme from where he does not expect it. It is an evil requital for the evil makr, and it in itself is a good makr or a good scheme. This is precisely, and of course the reference is in the write-up, this is precisely what happened in Samarra. Al-Mutawakkil's plot backfired in two magnificent ways. First, by trying to humiliate the Imam, he brought a source of pure light into his own dark capital, a light he could not control, as we shall see in our next point. Second, and more strategically, he severed the Imam's physical access to his community. In doing so, the Caliph forced the Shia to perfect the very clandestine network that he was trying to destroy. This imprisonment was the divine catalyst for the most important organizational evolution in Shia history, the preparation for the occultation. The great martyr, Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, may God rest his pure soul, analyzed this brilliantly. He explained that the Imams were not just spiritual guides. They were building a conscious base that could function on its own. The pressure of Samarra accelerated this process. Ayatollah Shahid al-Sadr, he says, the Imams, peace and blessings be upon them, were building this conscious base through a network of agents and communications. And this structure is what formed the true immunity for Islam and the community. And of course, the reference is in the write-up. The Caliph built a physical prison, but the Imam, in response, finalized the construction of an organizational fortress that spanned the entire Muslim world, indeed the entire world. So let's now look at our call to clarify for this point, our modern Samarra. This history is not confined to 9th century Iraq. We all face Samarra moments. We live in an age of sophisticated despots who seek to imprison us. Now, their prisons are not always made of bricks. They are built from propaganda that cages the mind, from economic systems that chain us to debt, and from digital surveillance that creates a garrison of public opinion, where holding a principled stance leads to an immediate attack or cancellation. The lesson of Imam al-Hadi is not one of despair. It is a lesson of divine adaptation. When the enemy changes his tactics, we do not abandon our mission. We innovate our method. The Imam's response to the garrison was to go underground and go global. While our speech is censored on one platform, we must build our own resilient platforms. When our communities are atomized by individualism, we must build real-world study circles and support networks. When the enemy's methods are sophisticated, our responses must be more so. As Imam Khamenei has warned, in the soft war, the enemy's goal is to change the calculations of the believers. Imam Khamenei says, today the war is not a military war. It is a political war, an economic war, a security war, and above all, a cultural war and a soft war. The enemy wants to influence our calculations. And the reference, of course, is in the write-up. Our Samarra moment demands that we build resilient, ethical, and principled systems of communication, education, and community support that can function despite the scrutiny. We must ask ourselves, is our connection to truth dependent on a fragile, centralized platform, or are we, like the Imam, building a distributed, resilient network that no tyrant can ever fully cage? Please give me a salawat and we move to the next point, which is Ziyarah al-Kabirah, a constitutional text of allegiance.
اللهم صل على
اللهم
محمد.
صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج.
a gift from the Garrison introducing the comprehensive Ziyarah or Ziyarah al-Jami'ah. Now, before we analyze the Imam's response to his imprisonment, we must introduce the doctrinal masterpiece he bequeathed from within that prison. Many of the Shia, especially in the diaspora, may have heard its name, Ziyarah al-Jami'ah al-Kabirah, but sadly, it can be a neglected treasure. Its profound depth is often overlooked. So what is it? A ziyarah is a visitation, a supplication and a salutation that we recite to address God's chosen proofs, the Ahl al-Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them all. This specific text is called Jami'ah, which means comprehensive or all-encompassing, for two beautiful reasons. Firstly, on the practical level, it is a universal charter of greeting. Unlike other ziyarah that are for a specific imam, like for example Imam Hussein on Ashura, Imam al-Hadi gifted us a single, perfect text that can be recited at the shrine of any of the imams or all of them together. It can be recited from our own homes, thousands of miles away, as a profound declaration of our connection and allegiance. But second, and far more importantly, it is comprehensive in its content. This text is nothing less than the most complete, eloquent, and profound theological statement on the nature, reality, and station of Imamah in our entire tradition. It is not just a greeting, it is a complete constitution of wilayah or allegiance. A charter that defines the lofty position of Ahl al-Bayt in relation to God and to all of creation. Now, with that understanding, we can now truly appreciate the miracle of its birth. So let's look at the paradox of Samarra, a charter from a cage. The context in which this incredible ziyarah was given is everything. It was not delivered in the serene environment of the Prophet's mosque in Medina, nor at a grand assembly of scholars. It was given by Imam Ali al-Hadi from within the garrison city of Samarra while under 24/7 surveillance. This is an act of supreme spiritual defiance. At the very moment the worldly tyrant al-Mutawakkil Abbasi believed he had successfully caged the Imam, the Imam was busy delivering the most comprehensive, expansive, and profound definition of Imamah in our history. He demonstrated that no physical wall can imprison a divine reality. The Caliph controlled the geography, but the Imam defined the cosmos. Let's now look at the unshakable authority of the text. So before we touch its contents, we must realize what this text is. This is not a folk prayer or a later scholarly composition. It is a core, foundational text of the Shi'i Creed, transmitted with the utmost of reliability. Its chain of narration is recorded by two of the most revered figures in our tradition. Firstly, Shaykh al-Sadiq in his masterpiece, Man La Yahdur al-Faqih, he who has no jurist present. And number two, Shaykh al-Tusi in his foundational work, Tahzib al-Ahkam, rectification of the ordinances. These are two of the four foundational books, or al-Kutub al-Arba'ah, of the Shia Hadith tradition. Its place in these books gives it an authority that is almost unparalleled. This is why the great mystics and jurists of our age have held it in such awe. The late great Gnostic, Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Bahjat, may God rest his pure soul, was once asked about its chain of narrators, or what we call Sened. He famously replied, and the reference of course is in the write-up, the chain of authority for Ziyarah al-Jami'ah al-Kabirah is the text itself. Those lofty concepts could not have been issued from anyone but an infallible. Ayatollah al-Jawad Amali, one of the foremost philosophers and exegetes of our time, has spent years delivering commentaries upon it. He describes it as nothing less than the constitution of imamology. He says, Ziyarah al-Jami'ah al-Kabirah is the identity card of Imam cognition, The Ziyarah is a complete course in Imamology at the very highest level. And the reference, of course, is in the writer. So let's now look at the core content, a declaration of cosmic truth. This charter is a complete reorientation of our reality. It explains who the Imams are, not in relation to politics, but in relation to God and his creation. Let's now look at a few stanzas or lines from it to try and understand this. Firstly, the fount of knowledge. In Ziyarah al-Jami'ah, there is a line which says, the locations of the cognizant of God. This is not just they know things about God. This is a far more profound statement. It means that the pathway to a true, non-distorted understanding of God himself passes through them. In an age of confusion, this is our anchor. Secondly, let's look at the axis of truth. Ziyarah al-Jami'ah has a section which reads, and truth is with you, in you, from you, and to you. In our modern world of moral relativism, where truth is whatever one feels it to be, this statement is actually an earthquake. The Imam defines truth as something objective, real, and located. It is not a free-floating idea. It is a reality anchored to the infallible. They are the axis around which truth itself revolves. Next, let's look at the arc of salvation. Ziyarah al-Jami'ah has a line which reads, he who comes to you is saved, and he who does not come to you is destroyed. This is the practical consequence of the Imam's station. It frames allegiance not as a mere cultural identity, but as a matter of spiritual life and death. This line from the Ziyarah is a direct and beautiful tafsir or exegesis of the famous hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, known as al-Hadithatu Safina, the hadith of the Ark. And this is, I will read the hadith for you. Of course, the reference is in the writer. The parable of my Ahl al-Bayt or household amongst you is that of the Ark of Noah. Whoever boards it is saved, and whoever stays behind from it is drowned. Now, this foundational hadith is treasured in the Shia canon, narrated by pillars of our tradition such as Shaykh al-Sadiq in his works including Uyun Akhbar Rida and Al-Amali and etc. Crucially, it is also well established as a hadith within the Sunni canon, demonstrating its universal importance. The great Sunni scholar Al-Hakam al-Nayshaburi includes it in his renowned collection Al-Mustadrak ala al-Sahihain, the supplement to the two Sahihs, and he explicitly grades it as Sahih, according to the very strict criteria of Imam Muslim, the author of Sahih Muslim. Let's now look at the modern friction. Is this Tawhid or Shirk? The Ziyarah is, in fact, the greatest lesson in Tawhid or monotheism and the most powerful antidote to accusations of Shirk or polytheism. The Ziyarah is saturated with the understanding that the Imams are nothing of their own accord. Their entire station is a reflection of God's will. They are not partners with God. They are the supreme creations of God. The text is explicit. They are God's servants, ibadukum, honored by him, akramakum, and appointed by him. The Ziyarah clarifies a core principle. Tawhid and Wilayah are not in competition. Wilayah is the gate to Tawhid. The Ziyarah states, he who professes God's oneness has accepted it from you. This means the pure, uncorrupted, non-anthropomorphic understanding of Tawhid was taught and preserved by Ahlul Bayt. To accept their guidance is to accept pure Tawhid or pure monotheism. The great jurist and philosopher, Ayatollah Misbah, may God rest his pure soul, dedicated much of his life to clarifying this. He explained that seeking help from the Imams, what we call tawassul, is no different from using any other means that God has created. He says, and this is actually in one of his most basic lectures within the Hawza. He says, if we use a means, whether spiritual or material, with the belief that it is an independent source of power, that is shirk. But if we use it with the belief that God has given it this property and that it operates by his permission, what we say bi'ithnillah, this is the very essence of Tawhid. The Imams are the greatest means or wasila that God has appointed for us to seek his closeness. Let's now look at our manual for the age of occultation. This is where the Ziyarah becomes more urgent for us today. Why would the Imam, just before the occultation, give us this detailed constitution? Because when the Imam is physically absent, this charter becomes his living representative. It is our manual for navigating the ghaiba or occultation. Sheikh Ali Raza Panhayan often speaks on this, framing the Ziyarah as the tool for building an Imam-centric life. And it should be noted that being Imam-centric is synonymous to being God-centric. Aghay Panhayan, he says, Ziyarah al-Jami'ah makes us Imam-centric, meaning in all affairs of life, from politics and economics to family and individual life, the Imam is the axis. The Ziyarah trains us for the era of occultation, how to live with an Imam who is present, but whom we do not see. And again, the reference is all in the write-up. This text trains us to see the Imam not as a historical figure, but as a living, present reality, what we call al-Hujjat al-Qa'im, which is, of course, one of the titles we have for Imamate. It is the foundation for the profound ma'rifah or cognition that is the bedrock of true allegiance. Imam Khamenei, may God protect him, identifies this Ziyarah as a complete Quran-based curriculum for this very cognition. He says, this Ziyarah Jami'ah, which is one of our best Ziyarah, is in reality a complete course on Imam cognition, what we call in Farsi Imam Shenasi, based on the Quran. These phrases that are in the Ziyarah Jami'ah, all of them are lessons. All of them are ma'rifah or cognition. It is this ma'rifah, this deep Quranic understanding of the Imam that gives us basira, insight, to navigate the complex fitnas or tribulations of the modern age, to distinguish truth from falsehood, and to hold fast to the rope of wilayah, indeed the rope of God, until the return of its final heir. Let's now look at a call to clarify how to use Ziyarah al-Jami'ah al-Kabirah at home. This charter must be moved from our books of prayer into our living rooms, from mere recitation to profound implementation. It is not a text to be read. It is a constitution to be ratified in our daily lives. Here is a simple, practical micro method. Maybe it's something which proves useful. So let's look at the weekly habit. Ponder, don't just read. Take one line per week as a family, perhaps at the dinner table, perhaps on Friday, anytime. Read the Arabic. Then, since it is known that sadly many translations are often weak and don't capture the depth of the text, don't just read a single translation and move on. Read more translations. Ponder the line. Ask as a family, what does this really mean? What is the depth here that the English word cannot capture? Why this word and not another word? This is an act of tadabbur, or deep reflection, not just passive reading. Secondly, the pairing. Find one Quranic verse that supports the line. For example, if the line is the guardians of God's secret, which is a line from Ziyarah al-Jami'ah, you could pair it with the verse on ilm al-ghayb, or knowledge of the unseen, from Quran, for example, from Surah al-Jinn, the chapter of the Jinn, 72nd chapter of the Quran, verses 26 to 27, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He is the knower of the unseen, and He does not disclose His unseen to anyone except to a messenger whom He has chosen. Next, let's look at the behavior. Derive one practical behavior from that line. If, for example, the line is, and again, this is a line from Ziyarah al-Jami'ah, that my heart is submitted to you. The behavior is, for example, this week when I have a personal or financial problem, before I follow my own desire or the culture's advice or what ChatGPT tells me, for example, I will first stop and ask, what is the fiqhi or Islamic legal ruling on this? What does the wali al-faqih or the marja say on this? What is the Islamic position on this? And I won't ask while looking for loopholes. This is how we transform this 9th century charter from a prison in Samarra into a living and breathing blueprint for our lives, our families, and our communities of today, that we can prepare ourselves for the return of the master of the age, our beloved Imam al-Hadi. May our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return. Please give me a salawat, and we move to the third point, which is dignified resistance in a palace of wine.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
So now we look at the tyrant's test, a plot for humiliation. The story of Imam al-Hadi in Samarra is one of escalating psychological warfare. The Caliph al-Mutawakkil, having failed to break the Imam's spirit through imprisonment and surveillance, decided on a new tactic: public humiliation. He sought to shatter the Imam's aura of piety and moral authority by forcibly dragging him into his own world of filth and debauchery. One night, the Caliph summoned the Imam to his private majlis, or gathering, a court gathering overflowing with wine, music, and sycophants, yes men. This was not an invitation, it was a trap. It was designed to force the Imam into a no-win situation. Either he would comply and be defiled, or he would refuse and give the tyrant a pretext to execute him. Let's look at the confrontation and the dignified refusal. This is actually a very beautiful story. The historical sources, including al-Mas'udi in Muruj al-Dhahab, which is the Meadows of Gold, which is his one of his greatest books, paints a scene. The Imam was brought before the Caliph, who was already very deep in his cups of wine. Al-Mutawakkil, holding a cup of wine, offered it to the Imam, the Wali of God. In this moment of supreme tension, the Imam did not flinch. He did not waver. He simply and firmly replied. And the reference for this is in the write-up. Imam al-Hadi said, "By God, it," meaning wine, "has never mixed with my flesh and my blood, so exempt me." This is the first lesson in principled resistance. A clear, unequivocal, and dignified refusal of the haram, of the forbidden. He did not make an excuse. He stated a fact of his pure existence. Let's now next look at the power of admonition, a poem as a sword. So thwarted and embarrassed, the Caliph did not relent. He pressed on. "Then recite some poetry for me," said Mutawakkil. The Imam replied, "I am little given to reciting poetry." "You must," the Caliph insisted. Here the Imam makes a profound choice. He's being commanded to entertain the tyrant. Instead, he seizes the opportunity. He accepts the invitation to speak, but he does not recite poetry of wine or women or flattery. He recites a poem that shatters the very foundations of the Caliph's worldly arrogance. From the heart of the majlis of debauchery, the Imam recites a piercing sermon on death. I'll quote it for you. And this is again in Muruj al-Dhahab, and the reference, of course, is in the writer. Imam al-Hadi said, They spent the night on mountain peaks, guarded by mighty men. But the peaks did not benefit them, and they were brought down after glory from their strongholds and made to dwell in pits. What a wretched place they descended to. A caller cried out to them after they were buried. Where are the thrones, the crowns, and the royal robes? Where are the faces that were once so delicate, before which curtains and veils were drawn? And the grave eloquently replied to them, those faces, upon them the worms now battle. Let's now look at the moral victory, the jihad of clarification, or Tabyeen. The effect of the Imams reciting this was instantaneous. The vivid, raw, undeniable truth of the grave cut through the Caliph's intoxication. The poem acted as a mirror, forcing the tyrant to see his own pathetic mortality. The sources state that al-Mutawakkil, the most brutal Caliph of his age, wept uncontrollably with tears soaking his entire beard. The entire gathering or majlis was reduced to tears. This is the pinnacle of jihad Tabyeen, the jihad of clarification. The Imam did not compromise his principles, but he also did not invite his own execution with a reckless insult. He used profound wisdom, hikmah, to speak a word of truth that dismantled the tyrant's arrogance from within. The Caliph, completely undone, ordered the wine removed and the Imam returned to his home, not with humiliation, but with honor. The Imam had turned the Caliph's court into his own pulpit. The source of this incredible courage is purely a Quranic principle. When one's fear is reserved only for God, there is no fear left for anyone else. In the Quran, Surah al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse number 39, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who convey the messages of God and fear Him, and fear no one but God, and sufficient is God as an accountant. Let's now look at the inheritance of Karbala, dignity over humiliation. This stance of dignified refusal is the inheritance of the Ahlul Bayt. It is the echo of Imam Hussein on the plain of Karbala. It is the practical application of his timeless cry of Hayhat bin Nadilla, meaning how far from us is humiliation. This is not a historical relic. It is a living, breathing methodology of righteous resistance today. Imam Musa Sadr, may Allah release him, in his quest to awaken the deprived, built his entire movement on restoring this sense of God-given dignity. He is quoted as having said, and the reference, of course, is in the writer, the human being is the highest value in the universe. Human dignity is the most precious thing in existence, and it must be protected. Ayatollah Sayyid Fadlallah, may God rest his pure soul, framed this as the difference between the logic of power and the power of logic. The Caliph had the logic of power. The Imam had the power of logic and truth. Sayyid Fadlallah, may God rest his pure soul, says, do not be weak in front of the strong. Be strong with logic, strong with proof, strong with your stance. Your stance is your weapon. And the reference, of course, is in the writer. This principle is the very essence of the axis of resistance. When Imam Khamenei, may God protect him, speaks of jihad Tabyeen, or the jihad of clarification, he's speaking of this exact act, dismantling the enemy's narrative. Imam Khamenei says, the jihad of clarification is an obligation. It means to make the truth manifest in the face of the enemy's distortion. This is the very thing our Imams did. And we saw this embodied in the dignified struggle of the late martyr, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, who built a culture of honor in the face of overwhelming terror. Sayyid Hassan is quoted as saying, a life of humiliation and disgrace, we do not want it. Our dignity is more precious than our blood. We are a people who do not tolerate humiliation. And we hear this same Husseini voice today from Sayyid Abdul Malik al-Houthi, may Allah protect him, may God protect him, who stands against global bullies with the exact same logic as Imam al-Hadi. Sayyid Abdul Malik al-Houthi is quoted as saying, "How far from us is humiliation? This is the stance that is harmonious with our faithful belonging and our identity. We will not submit and we will not be subjugated before the tyrants of the age." And of course, the reference is in the write-up. So now let's look at our third call to clarify, our Mutawakkil's court. This is the crescendo of our session, because this is our most practical daily test. We all face Mutawakkil's court, and it takes many forms. Sometimes the court is personal and unavoidable. It is the high-pressure work meeting or a family gathering where wine is being served, where the wine being served is not alcohol, but something just as intoxicating and forbidden. Vicious backbiting, known as ghiba, or slander, known as buhtan. The court demands your silent assent, or worse, your participation in order to fit in. Sometimes the court is digital. It is the social media mob where the pressure is immense to remain silent on injustice, to compromise your principles, or to join a degenerate trend lest you be cancelled. And just as often, Mutawakkil's court is geopolitical and professional. It is the high-stakes meeting where your principles are tested against massive worldly gain. It is the court of the business owner who is offered a lucrative multi-million-dollar or pound contract with an entity complicit with a state that the International Court of Justice has plausibly accused of committing genocide. The fiscal gain is enormous, but the Imam's model demands an absolute refusal. And this refusal is not a matter of secular law, citing the Genocide Convention and human rights and other such things. For a person of God, the primary driver is God's law. Our refusal is, first and foremost, an Islamic duty. And as Imam Khomeini has said, we are duty-driven, not results-driven. It is a core tenet of our faith, the principle of al-Bara', disavowal from the oppressors. God gives us a clear and terrifying command from the Quran. This is from Surah Al-Hud, the chapter of Prophet Hud, 11th chapter of the Quran, verse 113. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And do not incline or do not rely upon those who do wrong, lest the fire should touch you. And you have not, besides God, any allies, nor will you then be helped." As al-Allama Tabatabai explains in Tafsir al-Mizan, this word, tarkanu, to incline, is not just joining the oppressors. It is any slight leaning, any reliance on them, any show of complicity or partnership that strengthens them. To sign that contract is a textbook case of rukan, or inclining towards a tyrant. It is a direct violation of another core command of Quran. In Quran, Surah Al-Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Quran, verse number 2, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And do not cooperate in sin and aggression." It is the court of the senior executive, approached by a firm that profits from social maladies, be it fraud, gambling, financial crime, the pornography industry, or entities that seek to criminalize humanitarian aid and dissent. It is the court that demands you support policies that violate human dignity, such as abortion, or the forced euthanasia of the elderly and infirm, disguised as mercy. In all these courts, from the personal to the professional, Imam al-Hadi gives us a clear two-step model for resistance. Step number 1, the dignified refusal. First, we must have the courage to politely but firmly refuse the haram or forbidden and the inhumane. This is our "my flesh and blood have never mixed with it" moment. On a personal level, the script is not to compromise, but to object. It is the courage to say, "I'm not comfortable being part of this conversation," or "perhaps we shouldn't speak about someone who isn't here." On the professional level, the script is also clear and rooted in Tawhid. As a matter of faith and conscience, we cannot cooperate in sin and aggression, or our principles forbid us from inclining towards entities plausibly accused of genocide, as commanded in the Quran. And number two, elevate the moment. But the Imam's model goes further. He teaches us that if we are given the chance, if we are demanded to speak, we should not just be silently present. We must use wisdom or hikmah to speak a word of truth that elevates the moment. So on a personal level, after refusing to backbite or slander, we change the topic to something more meaningful, something that helps the people. And on the professional or digital level, this means not just silently declining, but stating why. It is being the one dissenting voice that posts the truth about injustice with dignity, refusing to be intimidated, even if the cost of that is that you become digitally martyred. This is how we honor Imam al-Hadi. We refuse to be humiliated. We build our own palaces of dignity, refusing to let the tyrants of our age, whether they are caliphs, emirs, bosses, or social media mobs, define our reality or compromise our principles. Please give me a salawat and we move to the conclusion, which is titled The Garrison, the Charter, and the Occultation.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So today we have walked through the garrison of Samarra with our 10th Imam, Imam Ali al-Hadi. We have seen how the tyrant al-Mutawakkil tried to cage a divine light and how he utterly failed. Imam al-Hadi was physically imprisoned for 20 years, yes, but he was spiritually, intellectually, and morally free. He proved that an oppressor can confine a body, but he can never confine a mission. From within that prison, the Imam launched his counteroffensive. Number one, he responded to the Caliph's physical prison by reframing it, turning it into the central node of a global network, a divine makr or scheme that forced his community to mature. Number two, he responded to the Caliph's political slander by delivering the timeless theological charter of Ziyarah al-Kabirah, a text that defines wilayah for all time, authored from a place of apparent weakness, but demonstrating absolute spiritual authority. And number three, he responded to the Caliph's personal humiliation by demonstrating his supreme moral dignity in the tyrant's own court, transforming a majlis of wine into a sermon of death, and proving that the only true power is the power of God, the power of God consciousness, the power of taqwa. This entire episode was not a historical accident. It was a crucial part of the divine plan. The lives of these three Imams, Imam al-Jawad, Imam al-Hadi, and Imam al-Askari, were a deliberate and necessary training ground. Their mission was to prepare the Ummah for the greatest challenge in its history, the Ghaibah, the occultation of the 12th Imam, may our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return. They had to wean the community off the need for a physically present, visible Imam, and train them to function through a system of guidance and representation. This is the most important lesson for us. We are the people living in that age of occultation. The training of Samarra was not for the people of the 9th century. It was for us. Imam al-Hadi's life teaches us that in the absence of the Imam's physical person, our connection is maintained by adhering to the system he himself put in place. And what is that system today? It is the system of the maraji', the great jurist, and the wali al-faqih, the guardian jurist. This is not a political opinion. It is the direct fulfillment of our beloved Imam's own command. In a famous tawhi, which I explained in a previous session, which is a letter from Imam Mahdi, Imam Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return, himself gave us marching orders for the Ghaibah. He said, "And as for the newly arising events, refer in them to the narrators of our traditions, which is the jurists, the maraja and the wali faqih. For they are my hujjah upon you, and I am the proof of God, the hujjah upon them. And the references, of course, is in the write-up, but it's very well cited. To follow the marja to the letter, without searching for and seeking for loopholes, without shopping for an opinion that suits us. This is the very definition of loyalty in the age of occultation. It is the spiritual discipline that separates true allegiance from self-deception. This presents us with a profound and terrifying question. Many of us recite Dua al-Ahad, the supplication of the covenant, every morning, pledging to the Imam of our time, may our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return, that we are from his helpers and his aides. We say in Dua al-Ahad, "O God, make me from amongst his helpers and his aides." And the reference for this is, of course, in the write-up. But if we fail in what is effectively the divine dry run for his return, if we cannot submit to the system of his chosen representatives now, what possible hope do we have of submitting to the person of the Imam when he returns? This is not a theoretical test. History has shown us a people who faced this exact spiritual challenge and failed catastrophically. The people of Kufa sent thousands of letters begging Imam Hussein to come. But when the Imam sent his representative, his cousin Muslim al-Aqil, their pledges evaporated. Their failure to follow the deputy led to the abandonment of the Imam and the tragedy of Ashura. We must wrestle with this honestly and beg God that he guides us, that he strengthens our resolve and ensures that when the dust of our era finally settles, we are not found on the wrong side of history, counted among those who claim to love the Imam, but who failed to follow his command. This is our ultimate challenge. Do we adapt ourselves to the straight path of Islam as defined by God, his Prophet, and the Imams? Or do we try to bend and twist the deen, the religion, to fit our own whims and our desires or hawa? The Quran gives a chilling warning about the latter. In the Quran, in Surah Jathiyah, the chapter of the crouching, 45th chapter of the Quran, verse 23, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Have you seen the one who has taken his God, as his God, his own desire?" Imam al-Hadi's life is the antidote to this. It is a lesson in absolute submission to God's authority, even when under extreme pressure. After a life of pure resistance and divine guidance, the Imam was finally martyred, poisoned by the Caliph al-Mu'taz in 254 years after Hijrah. He passed the standard of Imamah to the same prison, in the same prison city of Samarra, to his beloved son, Imam Hassan al-Askari. We have now seen the profound theological charter that Imam al-Hadi codified. But a charter is only a document. To be effective, it needs an engine. In our next session, God willing, we will study the masterpiece of his mission, the clandestine infrastructure he perfected, the wikala system, the wikala meaning agency system, that turned this divine doctrine into a living and global reality. Please give me a salawat and we move to the supplication eulogy for Imam al-Hadi, which is titled Salutations to the Light in the Garrison.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. O God, send your boundless peace and blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, the sons of guidance, the arks of salvation, and the firm handle of Tawhid. O God, we turn to you tonight, our hearts humbled and our spirits yearning, seeking your closeness through the light of your 10th proof, your friend and servant, our beloved Imam, Imam Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hadi. We remember him, O God, as the light you placed within the darkness of a military garrison, We remember your wali, whom the tyrant al-Mutawakkil tried to cage, but who, from that very cage, defined the cosmos for us. We turn to you through him, O Master, through the one who is the location of your cognition, through the one who is the guardian of your secret, through the one who taught us that the truth is with them, in them, from them, and to them. We turn to you through his dignified stance in the court of debauchery, who refused the tyrant's wine and with a poem on death, shattering the tyrant's arrogance. O God, by the sanctity of Imam al-Hadi, we too find ourselves in a Samarra of our own, a world of digital garrisons, moral corruption, and constant pressure to compromise our principles. So in this moment, we renew our covenant. We say it as we say in our morning pledge. O proof of God, O our master, Imam al-Mahdi, we are your helpers, we are your aides, we are those who hasten to fulfill your command. Our hearts are submitted to you, our affair is following you, and our victory is prepared for you. O God, accept this pledge, and join us by your mercy with that great Karbala'i caravan of martyrs who fulfilled this covenant with their very blood. We send our salutations and remember their sacrifice. We remember the jurists of the front lines, Ayatollah Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr and Ayatollah Shaheed Muhammad Sadiq al-Sadr, and the pure lady of resistance who stood with them, Sayyidah Amina bint al-Huda. We remember the masters of this path, Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, Shaykh Raghib Harb, Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi and his noble wife, Yasir, and their innocent child, Hussein, who were martyred together. We remember Shaykh Raghib Harb and the master of the victories, Haj Ahmed Maghniyi. We remember the commanders of the Axis, the shepherd of the resistance, the master of the martyrs of the Islamic resistance, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the beloved Haj Qasim Sulaimani, the hero, the honorable hero of Palestine, the martyr Yahya Sinwar, and the lion of Iraq, Haj Abdul Mahdi al-Muhandis. We remember Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim and every soul who was oppressed and killed by the lowest of the low, who stood for truth and in the path of the God of Hussein. O God, their blood was shed for the sake of the oppressed, and today our hearts break for those who continue their path. We see the children of Gaza. We see the victims of Mutawakkil's modern ilk, the homeless and the infirm, the elderly left to die, the infants denied life, while the political elites of our age live in their own debauched courts, inclining towards those who commit genocide. O God, we cry out with the cry of Nudba. Where is the one to avenge? Where is the awaited one to cut the ropes of tyranny? O God, we turn to you through your final proof, the son of al-Hadi, the grandson of al-Hadi, our living master, Imam al-Mahdi. May our souls be his ransom, and may you, O God, hasten his return. We pledge our loyalty to him today, in this age of occultation, by pledging to follow his command, by pledging to make the sun rise in the west. O God, grant us the tawfiq to follow his deputies, our righteous Maraja and the Wali al-Faqih, to the letter. O God, grant us the spiritual discipline to adapt our lives to your path and not twist your path to fit our desires. O God, make us from amongst his best followers. Make us from those who, when the Kufic test of Muslim al-Aqil comes, we are from those who do not falter. O God, make us from those who, when our Imam and his representative command us to jump, we do not ask why, rather we ask how high. O God, accept this supplication, O most merciful of the merciful. O God, hasten the return of your wali, and make us those who work with him towards his ultimate victory. And our final prayer is always, all praise be to God, the Lord Sustainer of the universes. Amen, O Lord Sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.